When my mother-in-law came the day after my husband left, she said, "No man stays with a woman who looks like a pig." She was standing at my door the day after my husband Adam moved out, and she was smiling like she'd won something while I stood there in my work clothes, still processing that my 8-year marriage was over. "You really thought you could keep him? Looking like that?" "I told him for years he could do better, but he felt sorry for you." The pity finally ran out. She pushed past me into what was still technically my house. "Adam needs his golf clubs. The ones you made him keep in the garage because you said they cluttered the house." A real wife would display her husband's interests proudly. "I'd asked him to keep them in the garage because he had 17 sets and never used them." "Your son left because he said we grew apart. This has nothing to do with golf clubs." She laughed and it was cruel. "Grew apart?" "He left because you're repulsive. You gained 40 pounds since the wedding. You wear the same shapeless clothes every day. You don't even wear makeup anymore. What did you expect?" I'd gained weight because of thyroid cancer treatment, but she knew that and didn't care. "I was fighting cancer." Adam said he understood. She rolled her eyes. "Men say lots of things to avoid drama, but watching you balloon up and lose your hair was disgusting. He'd come to my house and cry about how repulsive you'd become. I told him to leave you then, but he waited until you were healthy so he wouldn't look bad. My husband had held my hand through chemo and told me I was beautiful. He said he loved me no matter what." His mother walked to the kitchen and started opening cabinets. "Love?" "He loved who you were at 25, slim and eager to please. You're 36 now and look 50. Your skin is loose, your body is ruined. You walk like an old woman. He deserves someone who takes care of themselves." I followed her as she inventoried my kitchen. "Taking care of myself?" "I had cancer. I survived cancer." She turned on me fast. "You survived, but at what cost? You're damaged goods now. No man wants a woman with medical baggage. Adam's trying to date again, and every woman he meets is younger, prettier, healthier than you. We'd been trying for children for 5 years before my diagnosis. The doctor said I can still have children after treatment." She laughed again. "With what man? You think anyone else will want you? Adam was your only chance, and you ruined it by getting sick and fat and ugly. This is entirely your fault." She pulled out her phone. "Look at the women on dating apps. Size 2s, yoga instructors, no medical issues, no surgical scars, no medication schedules. This is what men want. Adam's already matched with dozens." I looked at the screen. "He made a dating profile already?" She nodded proudly. "I helped him write it. 6'2" successful businessman seeking healthy, attractive woman for fresh start. Hundreds of matches in 2 days. All better than you." She walked upstairs to the bedroom and I followed. "Adam paid for this house with his job. You contributed nothing. Housewives are supposed to at least be attractive. You failed at your only job." I'd worked full-time until cancer, used my entire savings for treatment when insurance wouldn't cover everything. I paid half of everything until I got sick." She opened my closet and started critiquing my clothes. "These rags? No wonder he left. Sweatpants, t-shirts, not a single dress. You dress like a homeless person." They were comfortable clothes for recovering from surgery. "Where's the lingerie? The pretty things wives wear for their husbands?" She pulled out drawer after drawer. "Cotton underwear, sports bras. This is what killed your marriage. This laziness, this letting yourself go." She moved to the bathroom and picked up my medications. 15 pills a day. Who wants to wake up next to a pharmacy? The women Adam's dating take vitamins. That's it. Just vitamins. They're pure, healthy, not walking medical disasters. She threw my medications back on the counter. "Adam's attorney will be in touch about the divorce. He's claiming irreconcilable differences, but we all know the difference is you became disgusting while he stayed perfect." She headed back downstairs. "The golf clubs?" I pointed to the garage. She loaded them into her car, then came back. "Adam wanted me to get his grandmother's ring back. The one he wasted on you. You don't deserve family heirlooms." I wasn't wearing it because my fingers had swelled from medication. "It's in the safe. He knows the code." She pushed past me again to get it. 8 years of his prime wasted on you. He could have had children by now with someone worthy. Instead, he got a barren, sick pig who couldn't even stay thin for him. She took the ring and examined it. "I'll have it cleaned and saved for someone who deserves it. Your diseased hands contaminated it." She walked back to her car. "By the way, Adam's already planning to propose to whoever he dates next. He wants kids immediately. No more wasting time on defective women." She drove away and I stood there shaking. 3 months later, she called me crying. Nothing. The stress of dating was too much. All those women rejecting him once they met in person. He's gained 60 pounds from depression. I still said nothing. He's scared. Alone. The medical bills are enormous. His insurance barely covers anything. I finally spoke. "I'm not helping you." I pressed the red button and dropped my phone on the couch like it burned my hand. My fingers shook so bad I had to sit on them. 3 months of silence, and she called me crying about Adam like I was supposed to care. Like I was supposed to fix the mess he made of his own life. The quiet in my living room felt huge after hearing her voice crack with tears. I'd never hung up on anyone before, not even telemarketers. But something about hearing her beg after everything she said to me made my whole body go tight with anger I didn't know I had left. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found Isabella's number. We hadn't talked in almost 2 years because Adam always said she was a bad influence. Said she filled my head with feminist nonsense. Said her divorce proved she didn't understand marriage. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring, and her voice was exactly how I remembered it. When I started explaining about Adam leaving and Heather's visit and the phone call just now, my words came out in a rush that didn't make sense. Isabella didn't interrupt once. She just listened to me talk faster and faster until I ran out of breath. Then she said she was coming over and hung up. 40 minutes later, she was at my door with 2 bottles of wine and a box of tissues. She looked the same, except her hair was shorter and she had new glasses. She hugged me so tight I started crying into her shoulder. We sat on my couch and she opened the wine while I told her everything again, slower this time. About the cancer and the treatment and gaining weight and losing my hair. About Adam holding my hand through chemo while secretly telling his mother I was disgusting. About Heather taking the ring and the golf clubs and saying I was damaged goods. About the dating profile and the hundreds of matches. Isabella's face got harder with every detail, and when I finished, she poured us both more wine. She asked me questions I didn't expect. Did Adam ever defend me to his mother? Did he ever tell Heather to stop criticizing me? Did he ever stand up for me at all? I tried to think of examples but couldn't find any. Isabella said that wasn't love. That a man who loved me would have protected me from his mother's cruelty instead of participating in it. That him crying to Heather about my appearance while pretending to support me was emotional abuse. I'd never thought of it that way before. I always figured he was just close to his family. That his mother's opinion mattered to him. Isabella shook her head and said that was exactly how abuse works. It makes you excuse the inexcusable. We stayed up until 3 in the morning going through my whole marriage year by year. Every time Adam canceled plans with my friends. Every time he made decisions without asking me. Every time he agreed with his mother instead of defending me. Every time he made me feel small. Patterns I'd explained away for 8 years suddenly looked different laid out like that. I barely slept and woke up with a headache from the wine. Isabella had crashed in my guest room and was already awake making coffee when I came downstairs. She said she had a friend who was a divorce lawyer. Someone who specialized in cases like mine where one person got sick and the other one bailed. Someone who would make sure I didn't get screwed in the settlement. I'd been avoiding thinking about lawyers because it made everything feel more real. But watching Isabella pull up her friend's website on her phone made me realize I needed help. The lawyer's name was Gabriella Rader, and her practice focused on medical hardship and financial manipulation in divorces. Isabella texted her right there and got a response in 5 minutes. Gabriella had a cancellation that afternoon and could see me at 2 o'clock. Isabella drove me to the office because my hands were shaking too much to drive myself. Gabriella's office was in a small building downtown with plants in every window. She was younger than I expected, with dark hair pulled back and sharp eyes that looked right through me. She shook my hand and gestured to a chair across from her desk. Then she asked me to tell her everything. I went through the whole story again and watched her face change. By the time I got to Heather's visit, her jaw was tight. When I described the phone call that morning, she looked furious. She asked specific questions about money. How much I contributed to the house down payment. What percentage of bills I paid before cancer. How much of my savings went to medical expenses. Whether Adam's name was on my medical debt. I hadn't thought about any of this as relevant to divorce. Gabriella explained that my financial contributions mattered. That courts care about who paid for what. That my medical hardship and lost income during treatment were factors in spousal support. She asked if I had documentation, and I said I kept all my bank statements and receipts. She smiled for the first time and said that was good. That we could build a strong case with proper documentation. I spent the next 3 days digging through boxes in my garage and filing cabinets in my office. Every bank statement from the last 8 years, every receipt I'd saved, every payment confirmation, every expense spreadsheet. I laid it all out on my dining room table and started organizing by year. The pattern was obvious once I saw it on paper. For the first 7 years, I paid exactly half of everything. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, property taxes, home repairs. I had proof of every payment. Then the cancer diagnosis hit and everything changed. My paycheck stopped when I went on medical leave. My savings account showed withdrawal after withdrawal for treatments insurance wouldn't cover. Co-pays, medications, specialists, tests, procedures, $40,000 gone in 6 months. Meanwhile, Adam's account stayed steady. He paid the mortgage alone during that time, but nothing else changed for him. He kept his gym membership and his golf clubs and his car payment. The paper trail showed exactly what Heather claimed was a lie. I'd contributed more than half of our shared life until cancer made it impossible. Gabriella reviewed everything I brought her, and her smile got bigger. She said this documentation was exactly what she needed, that it proved I was an equal financial partner who depleted my resources due to medical crisis, while Adam maintained his wealth. That it showed I sacrificed my savings and career for health while he protected his assets. She drafted divorce papers with a detailed accounting of every contribution I made, every payment, every expense, every sacrifice. She included a request for spousal support based on my medical hardship and career interruption. She explained that Adam's attorney would probably fight it, would probably claim I was a gold digger trying to take advantage. But she wasn't worried because we had documentation that told the real story. She filed the papers on a Wednesday afternoon and said we'd hear back within 2 weeks. Jeremiah Bender responded in 5 days with a letter that made Gabriella laugh out loud when she read it. He demanded I vacate the house immediately, claimed I had no right to any shared assets, said I should waive all claims to property and support, threatened to drag out proceedings if I didn't comply. Gabriella called me and read the whole thing over the phone. Then she explained this was a bullying tactic, that Adam's lawyer was trying to scare me into settling for nothing, that it wouldn't hold up in court because we had proof of my contributions. That judges don't look kindly at attorneys who make unreasonable demands. She said not to worry, that this actually made our case stronger, because it showed Adam was being unreasonable. I felt relieved hearing her confidence even though the letter scared me. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan 2 days later. She said she wanted to talk because she was worried about both of us, that she knew things were messy, but she hoped we could still be friends. I stared at the message for 10 minutes trying to decide if I wanted to respond. Megan had always been kind to me. Never cruel like Heather, never judgmental. She sent me care packages during chemo, called to check on me, sent funny cards to make me laugh. But she was also Adam's sister, part of his family, part of the system that created him. I texted back and agreed to meet for coffee because I was curious what she knew, what she'd heard, what side she was on. We met at a cafe near her work on Saturday morning. Megan looked tired when she walked in. She hugged me and ordered us both lattes, and we sat by the window. She started by saying she heard about the divorce and was sorry things didn't work out, that she always liked me and hoped we could stay in touch. I nodded and waited for her to get to the real reason she called. She took a long breath and said Adam was living in Heather's basement, that he was falling apart, gaining weight, not showering, not leaving the house. That dating was harder than he expected, that women rejected him when they met in person, that he was depressed and scared and didn't know what to do. I listened without reacting, and she kept talking. She said Heather was worried about him, that she didn't know how to help, that maybe I could talk to him. I almost laughed at that but held it in. Then Megan said something that made me sit up straighter. She admitted she heard Heather's speech to me, that she was there that day hiding in the car, that she heard everything her mother said and was horrified by it, that she wanted to come in and stop it but was too scared of Heather's anger. I needed to know the truth, and I asked Megan directly if Adam really complained about how I looked during treatment. She stopped stirring her coffee and stared at the foam for what felt like a full minute. Then she nodded slowly and said yes, he did complain to Heather about my appearance. My stomach dropped, but I stayed quiet and waited for her to keep talking. She explained that Adam was scared when I got sick and didn't know how to handle watching me go through chemo. He talked to Heather because he needed someone to vent to, and she was always available to listen. But Heather took every small complaint and turned it into something huge and ugly. She encouraged his worst thoughts and made them bigger than they were. Megan said Adam would mention that I looked tired, and Heather would respond that I looked disgusting. He'd say the weight gain worried him, and she'd tell him I was becoming repulsive. She amplified everything until his fears became her weapons. Megan looked at me with real sadness and said that didn't excuse what he did. Being scared didn't give him permission to abandon me or let his mother attack me. She said she wanted me to know the truth even if it made Adam look worse. I sat there processing this information and realized it actually did make things clearer. Adam wasn't some monster who deliberately set out to destroy me. He was just weak. He was a coward who couldn't handle hard things and ran to his mother instead of being honest with me. But weakness that allows cruelty is still a choice. He chose to complain to Heather instead of talking to me. He chose to let her hatred grow instead of defending me. He chose to leave instead of staying. Every single one of those was a choice he made. I told Megan I appreciated her honesty and that it helped me understand what really happened. But I also told her I couldn't have contact with Adam or anyone in his family right now. I needed to protect myself and build my own life without them in it. She nodded and said she understood. She hoped maybe someday we could be friends again, but she respected that I needed space. We finished our coffee and hugged goodbye, and I drove home feeling oddly lighter. My therapy session with Sarah 3 days later focused entirely on what Megan told me. Sarah listened to the whole story and then asked how it felt to learn that Adam complained about me while pretending to be supportive. I told her it felt worse than the abandonment in some ways. The abandonment hurt, but this felt like a deeper betrayal because it meant my entire reality during treatment was fake. Every time Adam held my hand and told me I was beautiful, he was lying. Every time he said he didn't care about the weight gain, he was lying. He was going home to his mother and saying the opposite of everything he told me. Sarah helped me see that this explained why the divorce felt so sudden and confusing. It wasn't sudden for Adam. He'd been checked out for months or maybe years. He just hid it well enough that I believed his act. The man I thought I was married to didn't exist. The real Adam was the one who complained to Heather and let her cruelty flourish. Sarah asked if knowing this changed how I felt about the divorce, and I realized it did. I felt less like something was wrong with me and more angry at him for being such a coward. She said that anger was healthy and important. It meant I was starting to see the situation clearly instead of blaming myself. I had my appointment with Caden the next week, and he was thrilled when he looked at my test results. My thyroid levels were stabilizing beautifully, and all my other numbers looked great. He said I was recovering better than most patients, and that my body had responded really well to the medication adjustments. Then he mentioned almost casually that the weight gain should start coming off now that everything was balanced properly. I sat there and realized I didn't care about that nearly as much as I thought I would. The weight had been this huge thing in my mind, because Heather made it seem like the worst thing about me. But sitting in Caden's office looking at proof that I was healthy, I realized my body had fought cancer and won. It had survived poison being pumped through it and surgery and radiation. It had kept me alive. Whether it was 40 pounds heavier didn't seem that important anymore. I told Caden I was more interested in staying healthy than losing weight, and he smiled and said that was exactly the right attitude. He said too many patients got obsessed with getting back to their pre-cancer weight and missed the point that they were alive. I left his office feeling proud of my body for the first time in years. But then Caden asked if I had any other questions before we wrapped up, and I found myself asking about fertility. I needed to know the truth after everything Heather said about me being barren and damaged. Caden pulled up more test results and told me my fertility prognosis was excellent. The cancer and treatment hadn't affected my reproductive system at all. I could have children whenever I was ready, and there was no medical reason to think I'd have any problems. I started crying right there in his office, and he looked confused and concerned. He asked if I was okay, and I tried to explain through tears that Adam's mother told me I was barren. That no man would want me because I couldn't have kids. That I was damaged goods. Caden's face changed, and he got visibly angry. He said that was medically false and cruel and that he wanted to know who told me that. I explained about Heather and everything she said, and he got even more upset. He told me that kind of misinformation was harmful and dangerous. That I should never have been told those things. That my medical records clearly showed I had every chance of a normal pregnancy. He made me promise I wouldn't believe anything Heather said about my health ever again. I promised and left his office feeling like another weight had lifted off me. Isabella called me that evening and said she wanted me to come to a cancer survivor support group with her. I told her I didn't want to define myself by my illness, and she said it wasn't about defining myself. It was about being around people who understood what I went through. I was resistant because the idea of sitting in a circle talking about cancer sounded depressing. But Isabella kept pushing, and finally I agreed to try one session. She picked me up the following Tuesday, and we drove to the community center where the group met. The room was bright and had comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. There were about 15 people there, ranging from their 20s to their 70s. The facilitator welcomed everyone and invited people to share updates. I sat quietly and just listened as people talked about their treatment progress and challenges and victories. 2 women mentioned that their partners had left them during treatment. One woman's husband filed for divorce while she was still in chemo. Another woman's boyfriend moved out 3 weeks after her diagnosis. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone and less ashamed. I wasn't the only person this had happened to. It wasn't because I was uniquely unlovable. Some people just can't handle hard things and they leave. At the end of the session, the facilitator asked if anyone new wanted to introduce themselves. I raised my hand and said my name, and that I'd finished treatment for thyroid cancer 6 months ago. Everyone welcomed me, and several people came up after to talk. The 2 women whose partners left gave me their phone numbers and said to call anytime. I committed to coming back next week. Gabriella called me 2 days later with news about the divorce proceedings. She said Jeremiah had backed down from all his aggressive demands and was now proposing mediation instead of going to court. She suspected Adam couldn't afford a long legal battle, especially with his current medical expenses. The dating disaster and depression had apparently created real financial problems. Gabriella said mediation would be faster and cheaper for both of us, and she thought we could get a fair settlement. I asked if this meant Adam was desperate, and she said yes, probably. That worked in our favor because desperate people settle instead of fighting. She asked if I was willing to try mediation, and I said yes, but only with clear boundaries about what I'd negotiate. We spent an hour on the phone going through everything. She took detailed notes about what I wanted and needed. We prepared a proposal that included my fair share of home equity based on what I actually paid. Reimbursement for medical expenses I covered from my savings when insurance wouldn't pay. temporary spousal support for 6 months while I looked for work and rebuilt my career. Gabriella said it was all reasonable and that she'd present it at mediation. She warned me that seeing Adam would probably be hard, but that I needed to stay calm and let her do the talking. The mediation session was scheduled for the following Thursday at a conference room in a building downtown. I wore a navy dress and did my makeup carefully because I wanted to look strong and healthy. Gabriella met me in the lobby and we went up together. Adam was already there with Jeremiah when we walked in. I hadn't seen him since he moved out 4 months ago. He looked terrible, exactly like Heather described. He'd gained a lot of weight and his face was puffy and gray. His clothes didn't fit right and hung on him awkwardly. He wouldn't look at me at all. Just stared at the table in front of him while Jeremiah shuffled papers. The mediator introduced herself and explained the process. Then she asked Jeremiah to present Adam's position first. He launched into this speech about how the marriage was short, and I was young and healthy and should be able to support myself. That Adam had paid for most things during the marriage and deserved to keep the house. Gabriella let him finish and then calmly pulled out our documentation. She showed bank statements proving I paid half of everything until I got sick. Medical bills showing I depleted my entire savings for treatment. Employment records showing I had to quit my job because of cancer. The mediator looked at everything carefully and asked Jeremiah several pointed questions he couldn't answer well. We took a break after an hour and I went to the bathroom. When I came out, Adam was standing in the hallway alone. He tried to walk toward me and I turned and went the opposite direction back to the conference room. I wasn't ready to hear whatever he wanted to say. I didn't owe him the chance to apologize or explain or make himself feel better about what he did. Gabriella was waiting and asked if I was okay. I nodded and said I just wanted to get through this. The mediator called us back in and asked both sides if there was room for compromise. Gabriella presented our proposal and explained each point. The mediator seemed to think it was fair. Jeremiah argued for a while, but eventually Adam spoke up quietly and said he'd agree to it. Just like that, it was over. We'd reached a preliminary settlement. I'd get 40% of the home equity, which was less than the 50% I deserved, but enough to start over. 6 months of spousal support to cover expenses while I found work. Adam wouldn't contest the divorce. Gabriella said it wasn't perfect, but it was fair enough. I signed the preliminary agreement and walked out of that building feeling free. Isabella brought over apartment listings the next day, and we sat at my kitchen table with coffee while she circled possibilities with a red pen. Most places were too expensive or too far from my potential job prospects, but she kept looking and making notes about which neighborhoods had good grocery stores and safe parking. We found one listing that looked promising in a neighborhood I'd always liked when Adam and I drove through it years ago. The apartment had big windows in the photos and a tiny balcony that faced south, so plants would get good light. Isabella called the landlord right then and set up a viewing for that afternoon. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building with hardwood floors that creaked when we walked across them. The landlord showed us the kitchen, which was small, but had been recently updated with white cabinets and granite counters. The bedroom was just big enough for a queen bed and a dresser. The living room had those big windows I'd seen in the photos, and they let in so much natural light that the whole space felt warm and open. The balcony was barely big enough for 2 chairs, but I could picture myself out there in the morning with coffee and a book. The landlord explained that utilities weren't included, but the building was well insulated, so heating costs stayed reasonable. I asked about the lease terms, and he said he preferred year leases, but would consider 6 months if I paid an extra deposit. I told him I'd just finalized my divorce settlement and would have first and last month's rent plus deposit within a week. He seemed satisfied with that, and said he'd hold the apartment for me if I could get him the deposit by Friday. I met with the bank on Thursday to transfer my portion of the home equity settlement into my personal account. The amount was less than I'd hoped for, but more than I'd feared, and it felt surreal to see that number in my balance after months of financial anxiety. I went straight from the bank to the landlord's office and wrote him a check for the deposit and first month's rent. He gave me the lease to review, and I took it home to read through every clause before signing. Gabriella had taught me to be careful about legal documents, and I wasn't going to rush this, even though I was excited. The lease was standard with nothing concerning, so I signed it Friday morning and dropped it off at the landlord's office with the signed check. He handed me 2 keys and told me I could move in whenever I was ready. The apartment was officially mine starting the 1st of next month, which gave me 2 weeks to pack up the house and arrange the move. Isabella recruited 3 women from the support group to help with moving day, and we all met at the house early Saturday morning with coffee and boxes. The support group women were named Kendall and Lynn and Rachel, and they'd all been through divorces after medical crises, so they understood why this move mattered. We started in the bedroom packing my clothes and personal items while leaving everything that reminded me of Adam or his family. His mother had been right that I didn't have much in the way of fancy clothes, but I packed my comfortable things and the few nice outfits I'd bought for job interviews. Kendall found my wedding dress in the back of the closet and asked what I wanted to do with it. I told her to leave it for Adam to deal with because I didn't want it and didn't care what happened to it. We moved through the house room by room, filling boxes with things I actually wanted to keep, and leaving behind everything that felt contaminated by the marriage. The kitchen took longest because I had to sort through 8 years of accumulated dishes and cookware and decide what was actually mine versus what had been wedding gifts. Isabella made executive decisions when I got stuck, and by early afternoon we had everything packed that was coming with me. The moving truck Isabella had rented was smaller than I'd expected, but we managed to fit everything inside with careful stacking. Rachel drove the truck while the rest of us followed in our cars to the new apartment. Unloading took less time than packing had, and by evening all my boxes were stacked in the living room, and my furniture was arranged in a basic layout. Isabella ordered pizza from a place down the street, and we sat on the floor eating and laughing about how empty the apartment looked with so few belongings. Kendall told a story about her ex-husband trying to keep her grandmother's china in their divorce, and how she'd hired a private investigator to prove he'd sold half of it already. Lynn talked about the first night in her new apartment after leaving her husband, and how she'd cried for 3 hours and then slept better than she had in months. Rachel said the best part of divorce was getting to arrange furniture however she wanted without someone complaining about it. We finished the pizza and they all hugged me before leaving and told me to call if I needed anything at all. I spent the next 2 weeks slowly unpacking boxes and making the apartment feel like mine. I bought plants for the balcony and arranged them so they'd get the best light. I hung photos of my family and friends on the walls and set up my bedroom exactly how I wanted it. The freedom to make every choice without considering anyone else's opinion felt strange at first, but then deeply satisfying. I could put my coffee maker on the left side of the counter instead of the right. I could hang my towels however I wanted. I could play music at whatever volume made me happy. Every small choice reinforced that this space belonged only to me. Heather called 2 weeks after I moved in, and this time I answered because I was curious what she wanted now. Her voice came through the phone frantic and pleading instead of cruel like it had been during her visit to my house. She started talking immediately without even saying hello about how Adam was getting worse, and she didn't know what to do anymore. He barely left his room at her house. He'd gained more weight. He wasn't showering regularly. She'd tried to get him to see a doctor, but he refused. She'd tried to get him to talk to her, but he wouldn't. She was scared and alone and desperate. I listened without saying anything while she went through her list of concerns and waited for her to get to the point. Finally, she asked directly if I would talk to Adam because he'd mentioned my name, and she thought maybe hearing from me would help him. I asked her why she thought I would help the son she'd told me was disgusted by my appearance, and there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she said quietly that she may have exaggerated some things Adam said. I laughed at that massive understatement and told her that Adam's problems were no longer my concern. She started talking faster about how Adam was really struggling, and how divorce was hard on everyone, and how maybe we could work things out if we just talked. I interrupted her and said I wasn't interested in working anything out, and that Adam needed to deal with his problems through therapy, not through me. Heather's voice changed then from pleading to angry, and she accused me of being vindictive and cruel for refusing to help Adam in his time of need. I reminded her of every vicious thing she'd said to me during her visit to my house. I asked her how she expected me to react to being called repulsive and disgusting and damaged goods. I asked her if she really thought I would help the man who abandoned me after cancer treatment, or the mother-in-law who blamed me for getting sick. She tried to interrupt, but I kept talking and told her that she'd made her position very clear about what she thought of me, and that I had no obligation to help either of them now. I told Heather that I didn't cause Adam's current situation, and that his struggles with dating and depression and weight gain were consequences of his own choices, not my revenge. She sputtered something about how I should be the bigger person, and how family helps family even after divorce. I said we weren't family anymore, and that she'd made sure I understood I was never really part of their family anyway. Then I hung up on her again and turned off my phone for the rest of the day. I sat on my couch for an hour after hanging up on Heather, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. But underneath the trembling was something new, something I hadn't felt in years. I told her no, I defended myself. I'd refused to let her make me feel small and broken. When I went to see Sarah 3 days later, I told her about the conversation, and she actually smiled. She said I'd set a boundary with someone who'd spent years treating me like I had no right to boundaries at all. She said that was huge progress. I told her it felt scary and good at the same time, like I'd jumped off something high and landed safely. Sarah nodded and said, "That's exactly what standing up for yourself feels like after years of being pushed down." I started looking for jobs the next week. My resume had a big gap in it, 8 months of nothing between my last position and now. I thought about lying or making up something vague, but then I remembered Sarah saying that my cancer wasn't something to hide or be ashamed of. So I wrote honest cover letters. I explained that I'd taken time off for cancer treatment and recovery. I said I was now fully healthy and eager to return to work. I sent out applications to 12 companies in my field and expected maybe 1 or 2 responses if I was lucky. 3 companies called me within 2 weeks. The first interview was over the phone, and I was so nervous I almost threw up beforehand. But once the conversation started, it went better than I expected. The hiring manager asked about my gap, and I told her the truth. She said her mother had survived breast cancer and she understood how hard treatment was. She asked what I'd learned from the experience. I told her it taught me I was stronger than I thought, and that I didn't take anything for granted anymore. She said those were valuable qualities in an employee. The second interview was in person, and I wore one of my old work outfits that didn't fit quite right anymore. The manager there asked similar questions and seemed impressed when I talked about managing medical appointments and treatment side effects while trying to maintain some normalcy. He said resilience was exactly what their team needed. The third interview was with a smaller company, and the boss was a woman about my age who'd also had cancer. We talked for an hour about work and life and survival. She offered me the job at the end of the interview. I got 2 offers total. One paid slightly more but had the same corporate feel as my old job. The other paid less but had better insurance and the boss who'd also survived cancer. I chose the second one. When I called to accept, my new boss said she specifically valued employees who'd overcome hard things because they brought strength and perspective to the team. I cried after I hung up, but they were good tears. Starting work felt like getting back a piece of myself I'd lost. Not just during cancer, but during my whole marriage. I'd always worked until Adam started suggesting maybe I didn't need to. Maybe I could focus on the house and eventually kids. I'd kept working anyway, but I'd felt guilty about it, like I was failing at being a wife. Now I walked into my new office and no one cared about my weight or my scars or whether I wore makeup. They cared about whether I could do the job. My coworkers were friendly without being nosy. They asked normal questions about where I lived and what I liked to do. No one treated me like I was fragile or damaged. No one acted like I might break. Megan texted me 2 weeks after I started. She said she'd heard about my new job from someone and wanted to congratulate me. Then she added that Adam was finally seeing a therapist because his depression had gotten bad enough that even Heather was worried. I read that message 3 times. Part of me felt relieved that he was getting help. Part of me felt angry that it took him falling apart for his mother to take mental health seriously. She'd told me to just get over cancer, but Adam's sadness got him therapy and support. I didn't respond to Megan's text for a few hours. Finally, I just said thanks and that I hoped therapy helped him. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know more. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks after mediation. Gabriella sent me the official documents with a note attached that said she was proud of how I'd advocated for myself through the whole process. I took myself out to dinner that night, alone, to a nice restaurant I'd always wanted to try. I ordered wine and an expensive main dish and dessert. I sat there by myself and felt genuinely happy. Not relieved that something bad was over, but actually happy about what came next. The divorce meant I was free. Free from Adam's weakness and Heather's cruelty and the constant feeling that I wasn't enough. At my support group meeting the following week, I shared that I was officially divorced and starting a new job. Everyone clapped. One woman whose husband had left during her chemo came up to me afterward. She said I was inspiring her to finally file for divorce too. She'd been scared to do it alone. Scared no one would want her after cancer. Scared she couldn't support herself. But seeing me do it made her think maybe she could too. I gave her Gabriella's contact information and told her she deserved better than someone who abandoned her when she needed support most. I went shopping for work clothes that weekend. I needed things that fit my current body instead of trying to squeeze into old clothes that didn't work anymore. Standing in the dressing room, I noticed something strange. My body had changed, but not just in the ways Heather had listed like accusations. I stood differently now. Straighter. More solid. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see someone who needed to apologize for taking up space. I chose clothes that made me feel powerful. A blazer that fit my shoulders perfectly. Pants that were comfortable but professional. A dress that I actually liked instead of one I thought other people would approve of. Nothing I bought was about hiding or fixing or apologizing. Everything was about feeling good in my own skin. Isabella called me a few days later and said she wanted me to meet her friend Nadine, who was also recently divorced. We met for coffee on Saturday morning. Nadine was funny and sharp and didn't take anything seriously. She made jokes about her ex-husband that were so specific and mean they were hilarious. She asked about my divorce, and I told her the basic story. She said her ex had left her for someone younger and thinner, and she'd spent 6 months crying before she realized she'd dodged a bullet. We talked for 3 hours about rebuilding our lives and dating apps, and whether we even wanted to date again. Nadine made me laugh harder than I had in years. When we finally left the coffee shop, she hugged me and said we should do this every week. I agreed immediately. My 3-month checkup with Caden happened on a Tuesday morning. The waiting room had the same medical posters and plastic chairs as always. I filled out the same forms about symptoms and medications. The nurse called my name and took my blood pressure and weight. Caden came in with my chart and smiled when he saw the numbers. My thyroid levels had improved significantly since the last visit. The medication dosage was working perfectly. My weight had stabilized and my energy levels were back to normal. He asked about side effects and I told him I felt better than I had in over a year. He nodded and made notes in my chart. Then he looked up at me and said something had changed beyond the medical improvements. I seemed different somehow. More present. More alive. I thought about that for a moment and realized he was right. Leaving my marriage had been as healing as any medical treatment. The stress of living with someone who resented me was gone. The constant feeling of inadequacy was gone. I was rebuilding my life on my own terms, and it showed in how I carried myself. Caden scheduled my next appointment for 6 months out instead of 3. That felt like a milestone. Like I was graduating from sick person to just person. I downloaded 3 dating apps that weekend. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just wanted to prove that I was desirable despite everything Heather had said about me being damaged goods. The attention came immediately. Dozens of matches within the first few days. Men messaging me with compliments and questions. Some of them were clearly just looking for hookups. Some seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I was picky about who I actually responded to. I looked for men who had full profiles with real information. Men who asked questions instead of just sending photos. Men who seemed like they might be worth meeting in person. The validation felt good. Every match was proof that Heather had been wrong. Every message was evidence that men did want me despite my medical history and changed body. I chatted with several guys over the course of 2 weeks. Most of the conversations fizzled out naturally. A few turned weird when they pushed for photos or got sexual too quickly. But one guy named Nigel seemed different. His profile said he was a high school teacher who liked hiking and cooking. His messages were funny and thoughtful. He asked about my interests and shared stories about his students. After a week of messaging back and forth, he suggested we meet for coffee. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived. Nigel was already there at a corner table. He stood up when he saw me and smiled. He looked like his photos, which was a relief. We ordered our drinks and sat down and started talking. The conversation flowed easily. He told me about teaching history to teenagers who mostly just wanted to look at their phones. I told him about my new job and how good it felt to be working again. We talked about books and music and places we wanted to travel. 4 hours passed without me noticing. The coffee shop staff started cleaning up around us and we realized we'd stayed past closing time. When I mentioned I was a cancer survivor, he didn't flinch or change the subject. He said his sister had gone through the same thing 2 years ago. He understood what that battle looked like. He had nothing but respect for people who fought it and won. That response meant more to me than he probably realized. It wasn't pity or awkwardness. It was just acceptance. We walked to our cars and he asked if I wanted to do this again. I said yes, immediately. Nigel and I went on 3 more dates over the next 2 weeks. Dinner at an Italian restaurant where we split a bottle of wine and laughed until my sides hurt. A Saturday afternoon at a farmer's market where he bought fresh vegetables and talked about recipes he wanted to try. A movie that we both agreed was terrible, but somehow made the evening more fun. He was patient with my boundaries. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give. When we kissed goodnight after the 4th date, it felt natural and right. I found myself thinking about him between dates, wondering what he was doing, looking forward to his text messages. I was cautiously optimistic about where this might go. It had been so long since I felt excited about someone. So long since I felt like myself in a relationship instead of constantly trying to be what someone else wanted. Heather called 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name on my screen. But something made me pick up. Her voice sounded different, defeated, sad, not angry or manipulative like before. She asked if I would be willing to talk to Adam. He had specifically asked for me. He was struggling and wanted to apologize. She said it in a way that felt more like begging than demanding. I sat there on my couch holding the phone and feeling nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just emptiness where those feelings used to be. I told Heather I wasn't interested in talking to Adam. He needed to work through his problems with his therapist, not with me. I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't his support system. I wasn't responsible for his healing. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said she understood. Her voice cracked a little. She said she wanted to apologize for how she treated me. For the things she said during that visit. For blaming me for Adam's choices. The apology surprised me. I hadn't expected it, but it felt more about her guilt than my healing. Like she needed to unburden herself more than she needed me to forgive her. I asked her why she was so cruel to me. Why she said those vicious things about my appearance and my worth. There was another long silence. Then she admitted she blamed me for Adam's unhappiness because it was easier than admitting her son made his own choices. She said watching Adam fall apart over the past few months made her realize she had enabled his worst qualities his whole life. She protected him from consequences. She made excuses for his behavior. She taught him that his feelings mattered more than other people's humanity. And now he was paying the price for never learning to take responsibility for himself. That conversation gave me closure I didn't know I needed. I thanked her for the apology. I told her I hoped Adam got better. I meant it because his suffering didn't actually make me feel better. It just made me sad that we all wasted so much time on a marriage that was built on weakness instead of strength. Heather thanked me for listening. She said she knew she didn't deserve my kindness. Then she hung up and I sat there feeling lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying her cruelty around with me and finally got to put it down. Nigel and I had been dating for 2 months when I introduced him to Isabella and Nadine. We met at the same coffee shop where Nadine and I had first bonded over divorce stories. Nigel was nervous, which I found adorable. He wanted my friends to like him. Isabella and Nadine grilled him with questions about his job and his family and his intentions. He handled it well. He made them laugh with stories about his students. He asked them questions about their lives. He treated them like people he genuinely wanted to know, not obstacles he had to win over. After an hour, Isabella pulled me aside while Nigel was in the bathroom. She said I seemed genuinely happy in a way I never was with Adam. She said my whole face lit up when I looked at Nigel. She said she approved completely and that I deserved someone who made me feel that way. My boss called me into her office 4 months after I started the job. I walked in nervous because unexpected meetings with bosses usually meant bad news. But she was smiling. She told me she was promoting me with a significant raise and more responsibility. She said my work ethic and positive attitude made me invaluable to the team. She said other employees looked to me as an example of how to handle challenges with grace. The promotion came with a new title and my own small team to manage. I thanked her and walked back to my desk feeling proud of myself. I had rebuilt my career from nothing. I had proven I could succeed on my own terms. The raise meant I could afford a better apartment and start saving money again. It meant I was financially independent in a way I hadn't been since before cancer. It meant I was building a life that belonged entirely to me. The support group meeting on my 1-year cancer-free anniversary felt different from the moment I walked in. Someone had hung streamers across the community center room, and there was a cake on the table with 1 year strong written in purple frosting. The facilitator smiled at me and everyone started clapping. I stood there feeling embarrassed and grateful at the same time. These people understood what surviving meant in a way my ex-husband never had. They celebrated the fact that I was still here instead of mourning who I used to be. We ate cake and shared stories about our recovery journeys. A woman named Kendall told me she remembered my first meeting when I could barely speak without crying. She said watching me rebuild my life gave her hope that she could do the same. I hugged her and realized I had become the kind of survivor I needed to see when I was at my lowest point. The evening ended with everyone signing a card they had made for me. I took it home and put it on my refrigerator where I could see it every morning. Megan texted me 2 days later asking if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated because I had told her I needed space from Adam's family. But her message said she had something important to tell me and promised it would be quick. I agreed to meet at a cafe near my apartment. She was already there when I arrived and she looked tired, but calmer than the last time we had talked. She ordered us both lattes and got straight to the point. Adam was doing better after 6 months of therapy. He had accepted that our marriage was over and stopped trying to date while he worked on himself. He was losing weight slowly and taking medication for his depression. She said he finally understood that his problems were his own responsibility and not something I had caused. I listened without saying much. Part of me was glad he was getting help. Another part of me felt nothing at all because his recovery did not change what he had done. I told Megan I was happy Adam was taking care of himself, but that I had moved on completely. I did not need updates about his therapy or his weight loss or his mental health journey. My life was separate from his now, and I wanted to keep it that way. She nodded and said she understood. She just wanted me to know he was finally taking responsibility for his choices. She said he talked about me in therapy and recognized how badly he had handled everything. I thanked her for telling me, but explained that his growth was for him and not for me. I had done my own healing without him, and I was not interested in being part of his redemption story. Megan looked sad, but she accepted it. She paid for our coffee and hugged me goodbye. I walked back to my apartment feeling lighter because I had set a clear boundary without feeling guilty about it. Nigel and I had been dating for 4 months when he told me he was falling in love with me. We were at his apartment making dinner together, and he said it casually while chopping vegetables. I stopped stirring the pasta sauce and looked at him. He looked back at me with this nervous smile and said he understood if I was not ready to hear it, but he needed to be honest. I put down my spoon and walked over to him. I told him I felt the same way. Our relationship was built on honesty and mutual respect, in a way my marriage never had been. He never made me feel like I needed to be someone different. He liked me exactly as I was with all my medical history and emotional baggage. We kissed and finished making dinner and talked about what being in love meant for us. Neither of us wanted to rush into anything, but we both knew this was real. I introduced Nigel to my family during Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house. My mother had been asking to meet him for weeks, and I finally felt ready. He brought wine and flowers and charmed everyone within the first 10 minutes. My father asked him about his job teaching high school English, and they talked about books for half an hour. My younger brother made jokes, and Nigel laughed at all of them. After dinner, my mother pulled me into the kitchen while we were cleaning up. She said she was thrilled to see me so happy and healthy. Then she admitted she never liked Adam, but did not want to interfere in my marriage. I asked her why she did not like him, and she said he always seemed more interested in how I made him look than who I actually was. I started laughing and crying at the same time. She hugged me and said she was proud of how I had rebuilt my life. She said Nigel looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room, and that was how love was supposed to feel. I decided to move out of my small apartment 6 months after the divorce was finalized. The place had served its purpose, but I wanted something bigger with more light. Nigel helped me apartment hunt even though we were not living together yet. He said he was investing in his future because he hoped I would want him around permanently someday. We found a 2-bedroom place with big windows and a balcony that got morning sun. The rent was higher, but my job paid well enough that I could afford it comfortably. Moving day was exhausting but fun. Nigel brought his truck and Isabella brought her car, and we made 3 trips hauling boxes and furniture. We ordered pizza and sat on my new living room floor eating it while surrounded by unpacked boxes. Nigel joked that he already knew where everything should go, because he had helped me look at so many apartments. I threw a wadded-up napkin at him and he caught it and threw it back. It felt like building something real. My 1-year work anniversary came with another raise and recognition as Employee of the Quarter. My boss called me into her office and told me the company valued my contributions and wanted to invest in my future there. The raise was significant enough that I could start saving money again instead of just covering expenses. She said other employees looked up to me as an example of resilience and positive attitude. I thanked her and walked back to my desk feeling proud of what I had built. This career belonged entirely to me. Nobody could take it away or claim they had made it possible. I had proven I could succeed on my own terms. Isabella called me 3 months later with news that made me scream. She was engaged. Her boyfriend had proposed during a weekend trip and she wanted me to be her maid of honor. I said yes immediately and started crying happy tears. She had been there for me during my darkest time when my marriage fell apart and I was questioning everything. Now I got to celebrate her happiness and help plan her wedding. We met for lunch the next day to talk about wedding plans. She wanted something small and intimate with just close family and friends. Planning her wedding felt joyful instead of stressful. It reminded me that love could be healthy and supportive instead of conditional and cruel. Watching her talk about her fiancé with such genuine affection made me grateful for the life I had now. I ran into Adam at a coffee shop 6 months after our last contact through lawyers. I was waiting in line to order when I saw him sitting at a corner table. He looked healthier and more stable than the last time I had seen him. He had lost weight and his face had color again. He noticed me at the same time and we both froze. Then he stood up and walked over. He asked if we could talk for a minute. I agreed even though my heart was racing. We sat down at his table and had a brief, awkward conversation. He apologized sincerely for how he handled everything. He said therapy helped him understand how weak and cowardly he had been. He said he let his mother poison his thoughts and he ran away instead of supporting me when I needed him most. He said he did not expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know he took full responsibility. I listened to all of it and then told him I accepted his apology. I meant it. Holding on to anger was not helping me heal. He looked relieved and thanked me. We talked for a few more minutes about surface-level things, and then I left. That encounter with Adam did not shake me the way I thought it might. I walked back to my car and sat there for a minute processing what had happened. I realized I had healed enough that seeing him just made me grateful for the life I had now, rather than bitter about what I lost. He was part of my past, and I wished him well. But my present belonged to me and Nigel and Isabella and my job and my support group and everyone who celebrated my strength instead of treating me like I was broken. I started my car and drove to Nigel's apartment. He opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could say anything. I told him about running into Adam and he listened without judgment. Then we made dinner together and talked about our plans for the weekend. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Nigel planned the whole weekend without telling me where we were going. He picked me up Friday after work with an overnight bag already packed and drove us 2 hours north to a small cabin near a lake. The place had big windows facing the water and a fireplace that he got going while I unpacked. We made dinner together in the tiny kitchen and ate on the deck watching the sun set over the water. The next morning, we hiked around the lake and stopped at a clearing where you could see for miles. He took my hand and told me he wanted to build a future with me. He said he knew we'd only been together a year, but he'd never been more sure of anything. I told him I felt the same way and meant it. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been ready for that conversation, but now I was. We spent the rest of the weekend talking about what we wanted and making plans that felt real instead of scary. The cancer survivor group asked me to speak at their annual event 3 weeks later. I almost said no because talking in front of 100 people about my divorce felt too personal. But the facilitator said my story about rebuilding after treatment and marriage ending at the same time would help people who felt alone in similar situations. I wrote notes, but ended up mostly just talking from memory about everything that happened. I told them about Heather's visit, and Adam leaving and losing my savings to medical bills and feeling like my life was over. Then I told them about finding Gabriella and getting my settlement and starting my new job and meeting Nigel and building a life that belonged to me. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to thank me, and several women told me my story gave them courage to leave their own bad marriages. One woman asked if she could call me sometime to talk about her divorce, and I gave her my number. Helping others by sharing what I went through felt like the final piece of turning my pain into something that mattered. 18 months after Adam left, I was sitting on my balcony with coffee watching the neighborhood wake up. Nigel was still asleep inside, and I had the morning to myself to think. I realized Heather was accidentally right about one thing when she said I wasn't the same woman Adam married, but she was wrong about why that mattered. I wasn't the same because I was stronger and healthier and happier than I ever was in that marriage. The life I built was entirely mine. My job, my apartment, my relationship with Nigel, my friendships, my support group, everything came from my own choices and hard work. Nobody could take that away from me or make me feel small about it. Adam got what he deserved and I got what I earned. That was the difference between us.